train your brain to become comfortable in uncomfortable situations. I don't care who you are. If you're trying to change your body, if you're trying to transform your financial status, or you're trying to change spiritually or emotionally, you're going to have to get uncomfortable at some point.
Drew, Fit to Fat to Fit. You did this in 2011 and again in 2020. Why? What's going on?
So two different reasons. The first time in 2011, I grew up in a family of 11 brothers and sisters, and I played football and wrestling from a very, very young age. And so I never once experienced what it was like to be overweight. And fast forward to 2009, trying to help people who were overweight pretty much every day of their life. And there was an obvious disconnect because at that time, I used to think it was so easy, right? You just eat less food and you work out. Like, what's the problem? You put down the junk food. It's not that difficult. You go to the gym, boom, you get the results. Like, why do my clients struggle? And so I had a client at the time who told me, Drew, you don't understand how hard it is for me or for people like me, because for you, it's been easy your whole life. And I couldn't argue with that. I was like, you're right. I have no idea why it's so hard. It seems so simple in my mind because it's all I've ever known. So I kind of was thinking of ideas like, okay, what can I do to gain a better understanding? And then boom, for whatever reason, this idea of getting fat on purpose popped in my mind. And it kind of made sense. It felt like almost a calling. I remember calling like my friends, my family, like, hey, I have this crazy idea. What do you all think of it? And like everyone was like, oh my gosh, that's insane. You should totally do it. That would be so interesting to follow. And I was like, yeah, maybe this would give me a better understanding, a better perspective. So I did it. So what I did was no exercise for 6 months. And I didn't want to do what Morgan Spurlock did, where he ate fast food every day, right? McDonald's 3 times a day. I wanted to focus on everyday typical American foods that we grew up with in the 80s, for example, that were marketed to us as somewhat health foods. And so I focused on those highly processed foods and ate that food for 6 months straight. Ended up gaining 76 pounds of pure fat over the course of those 6 months. And it was the hardest, most humbling thing I've ever done. And it really opened up my eyes to just how wrong I was. And so that's why I did it the first time, to truly gain a better understanding of what it was like to be overweight for the first time.
Was it just as hard to put it on when you think about it compared to taking it off? And some of the thoughts that come to mind is about like habit forming, and this is totally outside of your norm. So you almost have to commit to this the same way that you would commit to a weight loss journey.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's a little bit of both. It was hard and it was easy, right? People are like, oh, that must have been so much fun. Yeah, for the first few weeks, I'll admit, it was way fun to have this sense of freedom where you could eat whatever you want to, whenever you want to, as much as you want to, and just not care about anything. That part of it was fun until the negative health side effects kicked in, right? So snoring through the night, affecting my sleep, which affected my hormones, which affected my mood, which affected my personality, my ability to handle stress. Became very self-conscious. That was another aspect of this from a mental perspective of my body image was my self-image my whole life. I was Drew, the fit guy in my mind until I gained the first 20 pounds. And I had a identity crisis. I freaked out. Like I wanted to go up to strangers and explain to them that I wasn't overweight.
Right.
I wanted to show them before
this,
pictures. Yeah. I felt so uncomfortable, right? And then, 6 months of this, 75 pounds, that's a lot of fat to put on in a short period of time. And so bending over and tying my shoes was, I had to hold my breath. Walking up the stairs, was winded, not being able to play with my daughters who were really young at the time. I had a newborn and a 2-year-old back in 2011. And so not being able to show up my best self, people don't really factor that part in. They're like, oh, it must have been so much fun. Like it's not fun to live an unhealthy lifestyle consistently, especially when you're not able to show up the way that you have been, for the first 30 years of your life. And so, yeah, hopefully that answers your question a little bit about, gaining the weight. It was hard.
Yeah, a lot of those things are common pains that people feel, especially for me. Like I have my own weight loss journey, right? And I remember thinking I'm going to wear a sweatshirt, right? Just because I wanted to cover up. But, the sweatshirt makes you look bigger. And it's like, it doesn't really make sense because you're trying to hide something, right? That's inside of you.
Yeah. So fast forward. First of all, I swore I would never do it again. Like I was so humbled. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, like I said. And I was like, look, guys, I would never do this again. I learned the lessons I needed to learn. And then 2020 happened, which was a very strange year with a lot of division in the world, with everything that was going on, especially here in the United States with the riots and the pandemic. And, I felt like the world in general lacked empathy. I feel like the fitness industry has always lacked empathy. And ever since that first experiment, I gained so much empathy for those that do struggle, because I realized that it's not just a physical transformation for people. It's way more mental and emotional than people think it is. And that's what I was trying to bring to the forefront, to be a voice for those that do struggle, to say, hey, it's not as simple as just eating less and working out more. Because if that was the case, everyone would be able to do it. But the problem is that we are emotional creatures as humans, and a lot of our ability to do the hard physical things is determined by our mental and emotional states. And our mental and emotional states are determined by, things like past traumas or challenges or abuse or triggers that we really don't have any control over, because it was dependent on the environment that we grew up in. And being able to overcome those loops, those neural pathways in our brain are really, really difficult, right? Anyone that's tried to change some type of behavior knows that it's very difficult to change. And so I was trying to be bring that to the forefront, to let people know just how difficult it was on a mental and emotional level. So in 2020, with all that stuff going on, I just felt called to do it a second time as a 40-year-old, because the first time in 2011, social media wasn't what it is today. Like the ability to live stream and post stories and really give people an in-depth look of what really goes on behind the scenes of gaining this weight and how hard and how difficult it is. I felt like I could do a much better job with the new technology and the new platforms to really show people what goes on mentally, emotionally, physically during this type of an experiment, in hopes to bring more empathy to the fitness industry. And then hopefully that would carry over into empathy for other people in general. And so that was kind of like the calling, the reason I did it again in 2020 as a 40-year-old, also because people in that age demographic, people are always saying, it is harder, and it is harder, right? Your metabolism changes, your hormones change. It can be harder, but it's still possible. And that's what I wanted to show people. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I want to talk about some of the trauma and overcoming that in just a second, but I was curious how you separate the empathy and the sympathy part, just feeling on behalf and really stepping in the gap. Like, how do you see those two as different components, and what makes it so successful or empowering?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've learned a lot about the difference between those two from Brene Brown, who's probably the expert on it. So if you want to, dive into this a little bit more, read her books. But, sympathy is something that I think a lot of people are able to have just naturally. Sympathy for someone, to take pity on them, feel bad for them for the situation that they're going through. Empathy for me is a conscious choice of being able to not just put yourself in their shoes, but truly listen to them so that they feel heard, so that they feel understood, because you're listening to understand. Whereas I think, most people, we listen to respond. We listen, and then we're already formulating a response in our head of like how we can fix the problem for them. And so I think just like the language we use, when we're sympathetic towards someone, is like, oh, you poor thing, maybe if trying to fix the problem for them, right? Giving them solutions of like, oh, why don't you just do this? Or I went through that too, and I got through it pretty easy. Why can't you do it, right? Empathy is like just truly listening to understand where they're coming from. There's a really good quote by Teddy Roosevelt. He says, no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And I believe that to be so true, especially for my Fit to Fat to Fit brand. That's what our message is no one cares how many certifications you have or the knowledge you have about helping someone lose weight or fix their body composition. That's cool, and people do want a part of that, but they also want to be understood, and they also want to feel like the person that's helping them cares about them. And that's where empathy comes into play, in my opinion. And so empathy can be a huge game changer in being able to motivate someone, because not everyone out there responds to like the David Goggins of the world, or like the Jillian Michaels that are just like militant, hardcore, no excuses, push yourself. That works for some people, but I think other people, if they feel understood and they feel safe, I feel like they're more motivated to actually do the work, instead of feeling judged, and then they get defensive, and they don't feel safe, going down that path. If that makes sense.
So because you went through that journey, you're able to kind of speak to and feel the same thoughts and emotions and realizations that they have. And because of that, you can help them overcome the traumas, right? Through what would you say are some of the core psyche or some of the core beliefs that someone has before they get started? And then what happens after they come to you, right? Let's say that you're helping them, coaching through that.
So the biggest thing is self-awareness. And I just talked about this on social media recently. I talk a lot about self-awareness, There's a good quote by Anthony DeMello, and he says, what you are aware of, you're in control of, and what you're not aware of is in control of you. And I believe most people in their 30s and 40s are kind of on autopilot. We've had enough life experience where our brain has figured out how to navigate, stress or difficult times just based off past experiences, and we're not really consciously aware of what we're doing or why we do what we do. We just tend to do it, and we can't figure out why we can't just willpower our way out of it. Like, why can't I just be disciplined? Why can't I just go to the gym every day and stop eating this food? And once you're able to figure that out and become aware of why you do what you do, building that self-awareness is key to then be in control of how you want to respond. And so building self-awareness takes time. It's like building a muscle. And there's a lot of ways you can build self-awareness, whether it's going to talk therapy, having a life coach, having someone just listen empathetically to your situation. Journaling is a great way to do it. Getting out in nature, meditating, whatever. Whatever. I mean, I would even throw in plant medicines. That's really big for raising self-awareness, because if you can figure out why you do what you do, what happens is in the moment when you're reactive and you, like, let's say your kids stress you out, or your spouse stresses you out, and you reach for the wine, you reach for the chocolate, like the ice cream, that's what you do. Now you're able to, instead of just react, you're able to push pause and say, okay, this is why I'm doing this. I understand that this triggers me to feel this stressful emotion. And because that stressful emotion, I want to alleviate that stressful, uncomfortable emotion. So I reach for something to numb or distract myself from that emotion, which is ice cream or whatever the substance is. And every human does that. We don't like to be uncomfortable, right?
And this is
So
also
being able to
conscious, right?
be,
This isn't something
yes,
that's like, oh, angry here, this here.
yeah,
It's all happening just autopilot.
yeah, on a subconscious level. And so bring it to the conscious level where you're aware of what you're doing and why you're doing what you're doing. Now you're able to take a step back and become the observer of your thoughts. And as the observer of your thoughts, then you get to navigate, okay, which path do I want to go down? Do I really want to do the path of, like, numbing out and distracting? And maybe you do. Maybe sometimes there's a day where you're like, you know what, screw it. I know what I'm doing, and I'm going to do it anyways. And that's a part of it, but that's a win, in my opinion, if you're at least aware of what you're doing and your intention, what your intention is. From there, that's a win, in my opinion, because now you're able to then next time be like, okay, do I want to do that again? Do I want to keep doing this to myself? Or do I want to make the conscious decision to say, well, what if I choose a different path? What if I, instead of react, I thoughtfully respond and choose something that I know is better for me? And that's how you overcome any kind of emotional eating or any kind of addiction, in my opinion, is by self-awareness. But it's something that takes time. It's not just as simple as like, willpowering your way out of not eating the cookie or the ice cream. Self-awareness is a big component about when it comes to transformation, but no one teaches you that in a 30-day get shredded program.
For sure.
So
You mentioned willpower, and I think that's important. And you posted something on your social media today about habits, and you said we make our habits, but then our habits make us. And I thought that was super powerful. And could you talk to us about the difference between maybe habit and willpower and how they work together?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It comes from this book called Willpower Doesn't Work by Benjamin Hardy. Really, really good book that he talks about, how our environments end up creating us. And, as a kid, you don't choose your environment, but as an adult, you can consciously set up your environment or change your environment to then shape you, because humans are the ultimate adaptation machines. And now we live in a time and age where we can, most of us, create an environment to then adapt to, which then change becomes a byproduct of that environment or those habits that you create. I would say another good book to throw in there is Atomic Habits. Consciously choosing which habits you want to implement to then create you to become a different version of yourself. And that's how change happens for most people. Whereas most people just try and willpower their way to change by just saying, okay, do it, just do it. And like I said, that doesn't work for a lot of people. But if you change your environment, change your habits, and then you adapt to that new environment and those new habits, then change becomes a byproduct of you adapting to this new environment. Like if you, your whole life lived in a tropical location like Hawaii, for example, and you go to the, Antarctica or somewhere, there's going to be an adaptation phase where you're going to be, have to adapt to this cold weather and climate, and it'll take time, but eventually your body will adjust and adapt to it. And vice versa. If you switch those locations, your body would adapt to that environment just because that's the way we were designed. And same thing, if you're looking to change your body in some way or change your mind, change your environment. So, hang out with different friends, little things like setting your alarm, but putting your phone, across the room and having your clothes laid out the night before. or hanging out with people at the gym that will, kind of force you in a way to, show up and do the workout or whatever it is. Like changing your environment will then change you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, accountability is huge. There's really so much there, but I was hoping that this can be really actionable for people that are watching it who are in this phase of pain, right? They know that there's something that they want to do, maybe direction. Give us some 3 steps, or how do you think through what's the first step, second step, third step, and how do you set expectations for people that are looking to get help like that?
That's a really good question. And you mentioned pain. The first thing that comes to mind is a Rumi quote that says, "The cure for pain is in the pain." And stop running away from the pain. Stop distracting yourself from the pain. Stop numbing the pain. Let yourself feel the pain. Let yourself be uncomfortable. Let it suck, but let it teach you something. And then you'll be able to it'll be able to pass through you, and then you'll be able to move forward, free from that burden, that stress. And so
Yeah,
I
which
would
is
say,
self-reflection, right? That's what
yep,
you're talking about.
yep, self-reflection, therapy, journaling, meditation. Start changing your environment to create those as habits. So whether that's journaling every morning, doing a meditation first thing when you wake up, setting your alarm, and having that meditation play as soon as you get up, or whatever it is to change your environment. Self-reflection, to build that self-awareness, that would be the first thing. The second thing I would say is to create or write down your goals of what you're trying to achieve. Share them with a friend, share them with your counselor, your therapist, or whoever it is. You need some kind of accountability. I know people think that they don't need help. Like, I don't want to put it out there because then if I fail, I'll look bad. Just do it anyways. And the last thing that I would say is train your brain to become comfortable in uncomfortable situations. I don't care who you are. If you're trying to change your body, if you're trying to transform your financial status, or you're trying to change spiritually or emotionally, you're going to have to get uncomfortable at some point. Like, that's just the way it is. You have to get uncomfortable. And the problem is, so many of us have become so comfortable with the way society is and our culture is, any kind of, you know, um, uncomfortable feeling, there's a solution for it. Like, if you have a headache, you take a pill. You have a stomach ache, you could take this. If you're cold, you can turn up the heater. If you're hot, turn up the air conditioner. You have warm water. You have soft bed, soft clothes, a car. You have all these things. You have food at the touch your fingertips, right?
Right.
We're so comfortable, and then when we try and change, we just don't like discomfort because we're like, this is hard. I don't like to be uncomfortable. No one does. But you have to train your brain to become comfortable in uncomfortable situations, and a couple ways to do that, I would say, that work really well, are taking cold showers. Cold showers suck. It's not fun. Like, I don't care who you are, even if you're Joe Rogan or Tony Robbins, who do this on a daily basis, they still say every single day it's the worst feeling in the world. But if you can train your brain to become comfortable in a very uncomfortable situation where you're, in the moment, you're like, this sucks, but you're saying to yourself, I can do this. This is hard, but I can get through this. Then your ability to then do, like, eat healthy food versus the pizza. You're saying, okay, this is uncomfortable because I really want to eat the pizza, but I'm eating something that is healthier for me. That's uncomfortable, but you're telling your brain, hey, we can do uncomfortable things. We can do hard things. And the same thing with working out. Like, hey, working out is going to be hard, whether it's running, biking, hiking, lifting weights, yoga, Pilates, whatever it is, it's very uncomfortable. But now you're training your brain to get comfortable in these uncomfortable situations. And then over the years, you're going to push yourself, push the limits more and more. And then those limiting beliefs you've had your whole life, you realize, oh, that's what's been holding me back. So I would say those 3 things would be huge to help people, transform their life.
And so within those 3 buckets, there's probably areas of life. I don't want to presume, but I would imagine you would talk about food, right, with coaches or with your clients. And what are the areas that you would apply those mindsets to?
For food specifically?
Or no, just like self-reflection, right? Is that on
Oh.
anger? Is that in my food? Is that on my exercise? Is that in how I treat my kids? Like, what are the self-reflections, and then what areas are you applying goals? And then from like a training perspective, how would you categorize the steps to help get someone from point A to
Gotcha.
point
Okay.
B?
Yeah, self-reflection, for example, a great journaling prompt that I have for people, that I have people do, is to take one event that happened the day before. There's 3 steps, very easy. One, you just write down what happened during the event, right? So whether it's you eating a certain food, right? You ate this food. And then the second step is to write down your feelings about that event. So what feelings came up for you? Were you frustrated? Were you upset? Were you stressed out? Were you overwhelmed? What were the feelings that popped up? And then the third step is to write down your thoughts about those feelings. And that really helps to build that self-reflection where you're like, oh, here's my thoughts or judgments about those feelings. Like, why did this feeling come up for me? What triggered that? How do I feel about that? What are my thoughts about that feeling that popped up? And then the next time that an event happens where you're about to eat the food, now you're more in control because you've been journaling about it for 30, 60, 90 days. And now you're able to then, more thoughtfully respond. As far as writing down the goals, yeah, I would say, for me, a big thing for me is I visualize my workouts, but I think for most people, writing them down, especially if you struggle with working out or you struggle with getting in something, if you don't know what to do, writing it down on paper. So in your journal, maybe do the journal prompt. And then the next thing, write down what your workout's going to be that day, whether it's walking, whether it's, hiking, whether it's swimming or lifting weights, whatever it is, writing it down as your goal. And I think that will really help a lot of people actually get it done if it's written down and it's on your to-do list, for example, for the day. And then the last one, getting comfortable being uncomfortable, is being present in the moment when you're working out. So a lot of people listen to music, they'll check out, they'll kind of just go through the motions of the workout, and that's fine because you're still doing the movements. But there's something to say about being present in the moment, and that mind muscle connection can really be built if you can learn to be present while you're working out, right? Feel every contraction of every muscle, feel your breath, and be truly present with the movements that you're doing, and be very intentional with every single rep, and notice how your body feels, and then talk to yourself, have that internal dialogue of like, man, okay. Like, for example, David Goggins talks about the 40% rule, where when you're feeling 40% fatigued, where you're like your muscles are starting to burn, that's where the real workout starts. Not when people get to that first, oh man, my muscles are a little bit sore, I'll do one more rep, right? That you're only 40% there. And so you still have 60% more to go if you really want to go to your maximum limit of like what you can put out there. And a lot of people stop at that 40% because that's where like, oh, this is uncomfortable. So your ability to push past that comfort zone, and your ability to be present in the moment can really train your brain to become comfortable in a very uncomfortable situation, especially during your workouts, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I would imagine that your book talks a lot about this and gets into detail and is probably more tactical. Tell us about your book. Was that the intention for this?
So I have two books. One is the Fit to Fat to Fit book, which I wrote in 2011, 2012. And I don't actually talk a lot about it because, to be honest with you, I was a different version of myself back then. Like, I didn't have these tools that I have now. And the reason I have these tools now, Nick, is because I've actually done the work on myself. I've been humbled through life. I've gone through divorces and breakup. Well, one divorce, one and a breakup. And I've gone to therapy, and I meditate every day, and I've had like really hard life situations where I've had to apply these tools that I'm mentioning, and that's why I can speak to them so much more now. My book, Complete Keto, my second book, came out in 2019, and I would say in there are some of these techniques and some of these tools, but I haven't written a book yet about all of these techniques. But what's interesting is it's something that I'm working on, and I haven't really talked about it. So
you heard it here
stay
first.
tuned. Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, we only have a few minutes left, but maybe why keto? And then, talk to us about why that's such a crucial point in your life now.
Yeah, for me, I see keto as a tool in your tool belt. Any tool, right, in your tool belt, you can use from time to time. It's not something that has to be the end all be all of this magic diet that's going to fix you. I stumbled upon keto in about 2015, 2016, and I did my own experiments with it. And I will say this about keto is different than other diets because your body enters a different metabolic state, and your brain, the way your brain functions, feels different when you're running off of ketones. Yes, you can lose weight on keto, but you can lose weight on any diet. To be totally honest with you, it doesn't matter which diet you use to create a caloric deficit. You can lose weight on any diet. The reason I like keto is because, like I said, the improvement in cognitive function and mental clarity is very, very noticeable. And I think it's a really cool feeling if you've never felt that type of mental clarity where I feel like, what's his name? Bradley Cooper from Limitless, where he takes that clear pill and he has, he can write algorithms and speak different languages and all these cool things. Obviously, it's not to that extreme, but you do feel kind of superhuman in a sense when you're deep in ketosis. But for me, I cycle in and out of ketosis. I use it as a tool from time to time. I don't feel the need to stay in ketosis forever. I think there's benefits to cycling in and cycling out, especially if you've never done keto. If you've grew up in America with the food pyramid, most likely you probably haven't been in ketosis unless you purposely fasted for more than a day or two, you know? So
Yeah.
it's good to be metabolically flexible, to be able to run off of both glucose from carbs and ketones from either fasting or from eating a high fat, moderate protein, low carb diet. I think it's a tool in your tool belt, and that's why maybe for some people they should look into it.
Okay, man, there's so much I would ask you about all that stuff. The
Oh, that could be
tools,
a whole podcast just by itself.
exactly. Yeah, tools are super important. People, I think that people look at tools as a way to overcome a barrier, right? And so the more tools you have in your tool belt, the more you can pull from. So
Yep.
someone knows that there's a problem, they're going to try this, right? And the
Yep.
context around keto typically is like weight loss. So I know that I want to lose weight, and then I go and I jump on keto and I don't do it right. And next thing you know, my body's reacting and I put on more weight than when I started. I would imagine maybe that your book goes through some of that and the details on how to do it properly.
Yeah. There's a right way and wrong way to do every diet out there. And keto, a lot of people get wrong because they just think if they're in ketosis, if they eat keto foods, no matter what, they're going to lose weight. Like people are like, hey, I'm following the meal plan. I'm eating keto, but I'm not losing weight. What's going on? Or they'll even test their blood ketones and say, look, I'm in ketosis. How is it possible that I'm losing weight? Well, because the energy balance still factors in. Calories in, calories out does play. You can't just eat all the fat in the world and expect to lose weight, because there's 9 calories per gram of fat versus 4 calories per gram of carbs and protein. So it is more calorically dense. I would say you do feel less hungry on keto if you're doing it the right way, but people tend to gravitate towards the comfort foods that fall into that category. So whether they're vegan or keto or paleo, people tend to gravitate towards the ice creams and the pizzas and the donuts and the cookies that are ketogenic or vegan or whatever, but they're still cookies, right? They're still treats. And if you're consuming that food more than, I would say real whole food, then you probably are going to have a problem no matter what diet you're doing. Yes, my book, Complete Keto, talks about the physical aspect of keto and how to do it the right way. It's a very clean, whole food approach to keto. And I think most people will feel better doing that type of keto approach, but also talks about the mental and emotional side that we've touched on here in this podcast.
Cool. Agreed. And so, just to wrap it up, what are you excited about right now? Where are we going in this new year? What's the outlook for Drew?
Yeah. So all these things I've been talking about are something that I've kind of called myself. I just came up with this term, conscious fitness. And it's a whole new approach to, someone's fitness journey, because I think most people know the approach that is out there, which is, hey, do this diet, do this workout program, take these supplements, get this body, and then your problems will go away. And I think that's something we've heard, decade after decade from the fitness industry, and people do it and maybe they lose weight, but why doesn't it become a lifestyle change? And that's where I think this conscious fitness approach of shifting it around, where your perception of success in the health and fitness industry doesn't need to look the way you've been taught. And so it kind of teaches people how to go on a fitness journey, but from a place of self-love, and implement these techniques and tools that I've mentioned, about building self-awareness and training your brain to become comfortable in uncomfortable situations, and doing it all from a place of self-love instead of a place of, self-hate or discipline, which can seem really turn a lot of people off to doing the hard work. Because people go into the fitness industry, they want this new body. They think if they get this new body, it's going to fill some void that they've been feeding their whole life. What I'm trying to do is tell people that as they are now, as imperfect as their bodies are, as much as they don't like their bodies, they are lovable and worthy as they are. And I feel like if people can learn to love themselves as they are now, then they're going to be more motivated to do the hard things that they know they're supposed to do. Because if you do it from a place of self-hate and discipline, that'll last you for so long, right? You can willpower your way through 30, 60, 90 days program, but eventually in the long run, you'll probably come back to your default mode of like, that still wasn't it. Like there's still something missing, and people tend to gain the weight back. My approach with conscious fitness is teaching people to love themselves as they are now, while they continue to work on a better version of themselves. And I think their ability to do the hard things, like I said, is determined by their mental and emotional states. So this conscious fitness approach helps them with their mental and emotional state first, And then their ability to show up and do the physical things is easier or more manageable over time if they can start from there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love it. That's incredible. So much of our personal drive comes from self-perspective, right? Or the perception of ourselves and what we're able to do, and keeping our promises to ourselves and being able to push through and, hit little goals and make progress in little goals. And next thing you know, you have confidence and you can hit bigger goals. And I love what you talked about in habits, right? Just setting up your environment, setting up your daily effort to make progress. Those little, a lot of times I'm a big proponent of saying we're going for singles, guys. We just want to get on base. We're not going for home
There you
runs.
go.
I tell my kids that all the time. So cool. Drew,
That's
thanks so
awesome.
much, man. Is there anything you want to leave us with?
No, I mean, if people want to reach out to me or find me, it's super simple. It's just fit2fat2fit.com with the number 2 in between. And, all my, that's my website. That's my podcast. It's my, my first book. All my social media handles are the same. But yeah, I would challenge people to try this approach where it's something different than what they've been used to. I do run these 30-day conscious fitness challenges where I kind of walk people how to approach what a conscious fitness lifestyle looks like. And so I kind of like coach people on how to do that through these 30-day kind of groups that we do. And all these steps, all these things that I've talked about are taught in those, because I think it's something new. Like there's no roadmap for conscious fitness. It's a new kind of term, but I think it can be a new trend in the fitness industry where people, especially like this new age approach to fitness, that I think a lot of people are turned off by the fitness industry. Not everyone wants to get big muscles and a 6-pack. I mean, sure, yeah, if they just could push a button and look like that, that'd be cool. But I think realistically, a lot of people wouldn't be happier with that approach of like becoming this, ripped, shredded version of themselves. I think people would be happy and content just being healthier for their kids or for their grandkids, and that's kind of the approach that I'm aiming to help people with. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, it reminds me, you can be the most successful person in the world, but if you're not good with yourself inside and your heart and your mind, you're still unhappy. No matter what the abs look like, no matter how much money there is, you can just really be destroyed inside. So I think it's a really crucial point.